Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on supply chain resilience in the grocery and retail sector. I'm Kathy Fulton, and I'm privileged to be able to moderate this discussion today. With me, I have Doug Baker from the Food Marketing Institute and Jerry O'Dwyer from Deloitte. And we're going to talk about quite a lot of things today related to food and grocery and retail. But before we do, I just want to give the gentlemen just a moment to introduce themselves and their organizations. So Doug, why don't we start with you, just a few seconds on FMI.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to the U.S. Chamber and FEMA for having me participate today. FMI is the Food Industry Association. We're a not-for-profit trade association that represents retailers from single-store operators up to large national, multi-state, and multinational chains, as well as product manufacturers that produce the food to sell in those stores, and then pretty much any company that wants to do business with or is needed in order to support the industry from end to end.
Terrific. And Jerry, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jerry O'Dwyer. I'm a partner with Deloitte Consulting. I've been a supply chain professional for the last 25, 26 years, and I focus in grocery and retail.
Great. Well, that is some good perspectives that you guys have to bring to the conversation today. So I'm going to open it up. Ms. Durkovich gave everyone a charge today when she asked her panel about their definition of resilience, and she talked about bouncing forward. I'm actually going to open with the same question to both of you. And Doug, I'm going to start with you again. What is your definition of supply chain resilience?
Hey, you know, Kathy, every time I write it down, I tear it up and start over again. But if we put ourselves as citizens, the consumer, the customer, at the center of this, then I guess the best way I can describe it is the ability to respond, recover, or adapt to an internal or external influencing event to ensure that those communities maintain access to caloric, hygiene, and sanitary needs. That's the best I can do, but there's so much more that could go into it.
There is a lot more that could go into it, but I got respond, recover, and adapt. And I think that adaptation is going to come up a lot in our conversation today. Jerry, same question to you. What's your definition of resilience?
So I'll try to be additive to Doug. So I agree exactly with what he said. I think the issue of resilience is how quickly can we recover and how quickly can we adapt so we get back to the assurance of supply or the things that we need to be coming through the supply chain. So there's an element of speed and adaptability and reducing the trough, if you will, in the disruption.
Yeah, if we position ourselves as supply chain experts, that assurance of supply should be top of mind for us at all times. But terrific. So we have, all three of us had opportunity to talk ad nauseum about the challenges and changes that we've seen over the past 18 months due to the pandemic. They've certainly tested the resilience of all industries. Some very egregious examples were highlighted within grocery and retail. But I'd love to hear from each of you, just kind of some specifics, what you think were the challenges and some of the changes you've seen. And Jerry, I'm actually going to start with you on this one.
Well, I think the key challenge when you get past all the shocks to the system, it really is, as we talked the other day, it was a balance of philosophies of having efficiency versus effectiveness, or the management decision or philosophy of just in time versus just in case. And those are trade-offs each of our clients have made and the industries have made in the spirit of having, minimizing inventories and maximizing, efficiency and earnings. So what I don't think people or clients were ready for was, they were ready for supply disruptions. What they weren't ready for was the labor disruption. How do you get the workforce comfortable to be coming back and being on the front lines? Grocery retail, I mean, there's probably no better definition other than, healthcare workers who are really on the front lines. So as I see it, the challenge was, how do you unwind quickly and adapt your system to what has always been the razor's edge margin, if you will, of efficiency versus effectiveness. So that's not something, I think the rules of that got thrown out. It's like, we have to respond. And I really don't care what it costs. Our customers need food. They need water. They need supplies. And that playbook sort of got thrown to the side.
Yeah, certainly. You mentioned assurance of supply, and whatever it takes is in order to deliver. You talked about just in time and just in case, and on a call earlier today, a colleague reminded me that we also should be striving for just enough, because we don't want to go too far in either direction with our just in time or just in case strategies. Doug, same question to you. Talk about the pandemic, what you have observed with challenges and changes over the past 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. And a couple of the points to Jerry's point here is, we when we recognized and realized some of those issues, it was really about keeping the machines running and keeping people in the store stocking as much as possible. So that was like having Christmas holiday sales 7 days a week, week after week after week, right? That you can't prepare for that. And so a couple of the things that we did was immediately created 2 partnerships, one with Eightfold AI to help facilitate recruitment of labor from sectors that were closed down into the food sector, and then also with the International Food Distributors Association, so that we could start redeploying product and equipment and people in warehouse space over to retail. And that's now known as the Food Industry Exchange, which is still live and well today, and it allows producers and distributors and retailers to connect and share offers and needs across sectors. But the other thing that really sort of was, we didn't understand the dominoes were just going to start falling, was some of the challenges were getting our employees to work. And it didn't matter whether they were in a store, a manufacturing facility, an adjacent sector that supported retail, but it was how do we allow get them through those local ordinances and get them into the places of employment that have been deemed essential. So we had to quickly come up with a letter that several of the retailers and product manufacturers could use on their own company letterhead that would identify them as essential. And then that still took some time, because either the message wasn't getting down to the local level of government, or they were really sort of sticking to the letter of the law at the time. And so it took a little while to move through that. And then it was the other area that was a real big opportunity that was, I have a great example of, was the lack of visibility into the whole of the grocery supply chain, right? We think about agriculture, we think about ingredient manufacturer, wholesaler, distributor, retail, but we don't think about the adjacent sectors that also supported the industry. And so one great example was the pin pads at the register. Whether it was a consumer or it was the cashier, they were trying to keep them clean and keep them sanitized, but they effectively were putting too much moisture into the pin pad and it was shorting out. Well, the companies that actually manufacture and maintain those pin pads were not identified as essential. So we then participated in an activity to help the White House and federal government understand the whole of our industry and what some of those adjacent sectors are and adjacent businesses are that support the industry, so that we could get them deemed essential and get them back into business.
Doug, you hit on things that I think you probably know are really important to me personally, and the value of partnerships, but you identified not just private-public partnerships, but also private-private partnerships. I know from the essential letter that you created, you were also sharing that across industries with, your peer associations. So kudos to you. I think we all should be thinking about what are those opportunities to leverage best practices to take our lessons real time out into the communities.
Yeah, I can't agree more. There was a lot of new relationships, and one of them was with the Restaurant Association, right? We're typically in competition, and they were doing 54 cents of every dollar of every food dollar being spent. It automatically went back to grocery, and we went from friendly competition to very important in each other's lives.
Yeah, and those partnerships, unfortunately continue, and but so glad that they were made. we talked about partnerships there. I'm curious, do you guys think that the lessons that we've learned and the changes that were made, do you think that they are enabling resiliency, or are some of the technology solutions that we've seen put in place, are they just becoming another point of risk for us? And Jerry, I'll start with you there.
So Kathy, that's a really good question. There's a couple of parts of that. So I'll talk about the partnerships first. So some of our clients have thought of their supplier relationships as vendors, not partners. And I think the pandemic exposed that as a weakness in terms of in a period of short supply, you supply your partners, not someone who's beating you down on to the penny on product. So I think there's more and more conversation, as you said, private to private, around how do we partner better. And then within that, there's a discussion around transparency, and it's something Doug mentioned earlier about visibility through the supply chain, and it goes also to the technology question. So the visibility is, clients across many industries are looking for transparency end to end. And what we've experienced over the last 18 months is many of our clients didn't have that end-to-end visibility. They didn't know that a certain portion of the supply chain was outsourced in another tier or another node. That was exposed. And to your last comment about technology, being in supply chain, I hear all the time now the topic of control tower, which essentially is how do you get end-to-end visibility? And there's technologies that do that. I can tell you before the pandemic, a conversation happened two to four times a year. A client had a specific need around assurance of supply. What happens in a physical breakdown of something, a plant blows up or a fire and you have to redirect. But now almost every industry, from actually the aid industry to retail to defense, everyone's talking about control towers, which all it means is end-to-end visibility.
Yeah, that's terrific. Doug, same question over to you. And are we more resilient? I mean, I guess really that's at the core question.
Yeah, I think, Kathy, we're taking steps, right? There's some might say they're baby steps, somebody might say that they're giant leaps, but I can speak for the grocery industry is, our technology advancement just for e-commerce, as an example, accelerated 5 years, as well as the sales. So the way retailers meet consumer needs has accelerated and really sort of broke the mold. And food retail is typically a little bit slow to change. We saw a lot of the technology advancements in soft lines and apparel and in technology, but not necessarily in food. And the pandemic pushed us there. And the use of automation and robotics and AI is really being accessed and taken advantage of these days. And some of them are quick wins, and some of them are going to be wins that are more experienced a little bit over time. But I do believe that there are things being put into place, whether it's streamlining SKUs and not bringing back those SKUs back because we thought we needed them. We don't really need them. Adding equipment, adding new types of equipment, adding additional forward warehousing. As you mentioned, moving from a just-in-time to just enough. Where is that? And utilizing AI in order to identify where that is. I do think that we continue to improve. And we'll be able to respond, but it doesn't mean that we won't find ourselves with new challenges, because each crisis is a little bit different, and so we'll have to continue to learn from them.
So Kathy,
go ahead, Jerry, please.
So what's interesting now is the whole topic of supply chain resiliency is now at the board level, and now we're experiencing, there was resiliency through, shortage of supply and diminished demand, well, for some things, but now we have resiliency issues with respect to recovery. And, and you see that in commodity prices that have fluctuated greatly, whether it's lumber. So now it's a different issue, but the topic of resiliency, how do you handle the downturns? How do you handle the upturn? How do you handle supplier relationships? How do you handle, the financial implications of, I know I have to be resilient, and that comes at a cost. how do I do that? So it's now a board level issue.
Yeah, I just was sent a study this morning. I've not had an opportunity to read it yet. Actually, Doug, your colleague sent it to me about that very topic, Jerry, getting supply chain is now at the board level attention. And quite honestly, it's at the public's attention as well, right? Whether it's because of toilet paper or whatever, everyone at least knows the buzzwords supply chain now. Whether they understand it or not is a different topic.
Well, even the president put out his executive orders around improving the nation's supply chain capabilities around 4 or 5 different areas.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about kind of internal workings. Let's switch now. We are at the private-public partnerships conference. What would you love to see from, you're both private sector folks, what would you love to see from the public sector to help increase resilience? What can government be doing to help private sector? And Jerry, I know you may want to put a nonprofit lens on this as well, but how can we all work together towards building resilience? And Doug, I'm going to start with you this time.
Sure. Yeah, a few things that, and I know Rob and I have had several conversations about them as well, but you know, there needs to be really good coordination from federal, state, and local. You know, and it's on the basic, it's in the waiver system, the ordinance process. So the more that we can streamline that and be efficient with that, that's both the benefit of being a United States, and it's also one of the disadvantages of being a United States.
Yeah.
You know, I would also say too, and this is really any type of crisis, is how can we do a better job pre-planning pre-planning with the food industry for mass feeding? You know, we've talked about that too. Sometimes the current program, it creates too broad of a pool and doesn't have enough assurances that the winning contractor has the supply chain to support those needs. And then the last thing that we really saw, and it could really be proactive too. So it's how do we build business at the same time? It's working more closely with small farms, small local farms to gain GAP certification, which allows, you know, to increase sources of supply and get more food into the system. So those are just a few things. There's probably several others, but a few that get us started.
Yeah, Doug, I love your recognition of getting more supply into the pipeline, especially as we look at, you know, critical situations like the mega drought out west right now, where a good portion of America's food is produced. So, Jerry, same question. What do you want from your government partners to be able to help build resilience?
Well, I think investments in infrastructure, I mean, obviously we're talking about that at the national level and the federal level. But what I mean by that is we need an infrastructure based on technology, and some things that Doug talked about, but also prioritization of resilience. And so, for instance, we needed a way to make sure, you know, how we keep the flow of goods. How do we keep visibility? And when I deal with emergencies, whether it's in the disaster work I do, information and capabilities are often siloed. And we need to move beyond that to, you know, in pockets. I think within states, we did a really good job of coordinating aid and coordinating response. And I think there needs to be a priority made around not disaster, but like it's just, you know, holding dear those things that sustain this nation: food, water, healthcare, those types of things. That there needs to be a better coordinated response, as Doug said, at the federal, state, and local level, because it's at times it appeared we were all out, you know, at those different levels, you were all out optimizing at each of those nodes as opposed to an overall national response. Investments in technology, investments in infrastructure, investments in port capacity. You know, we have significant reliance on other countries for our supply chain.
Yeah. So much we could delve into there. Unfortunately, we're getting close on time here. So 15 seconds or less, last comments, and Jerry, will go to you first.
As I said, supply chain is a board level issue. Have to invest in, you know, to think through what your strategy is, and depends on the sector, but there needs to be several scenarios, and you have to do scenario planning.
Great. Doug?
Yeah, investment in people and technology, because those are the two things that are going to get us through crises.
100% agreed. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your commentary today. To the Chamber, FEMA, Northcom, DHS, thank you guys for the invitation. And I believe I'm turning it back over to Mr. DeCourcy for the next session.